I am now very pleased and honored to introduce to you our guest senior teachers. Starting out with Dr. Wilfred Barlow. Marjory Barlow. Marjory Barstow. Walter Carrington. And Dillis Carrington. Patrick McDonald.
Are we rolling? Oh, God. Well, hello, everybody. I've seen you all before, haven't I? I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. Is there anybody here who isn't in a state of total confusion about what the Alexander technique is? Don't answer. Is there anybody here who isn't suffering from Alexander indigestion? Again, don't answer. It's an awfully concentrated dose you're getting. I don't know how you're managing to still stay in the orthograde posture. I thought today we'd do some lying down work because there is a school of thought that says FM didn't do lying down work. He had no table in his room, but in the old days, I mean the really old days, he would give somebody a lesson, and then they would come to one or two of us, in my case it was usually Pat and me, to have a lying down turn. When I was in the training course, he spent a great deal of time, hour after hour, day after day, teaching us how to give somebody a lying down turn. He thought it was important, that part of the work, because he said when a pupil is lying down, they don't have any problems with their equilibrium, because as you know, when you change, you have this problem of balance. And when you're lying down, you really have nothing to do except inhibit, listen to your teacher, and give your orders. So, you know, and also the fact that you're on a fairly firm base with your back is, I mean, the floor's the best thing, really, with a rug on it. About equilibrium, yes, Luli Westfeld, there's a lovely thing that used to happen sometimes. Erica will confirm this, that Luli, who had polio and had a, what's the thing called, tendon? Ligament cut. Yeah, her ankle was fixed. So as she changed and FM worked on her, she had great problems with feeling, you know, bad equilibrium. And she used to, FM would be working with her, and with her left hand she would clutch his arm and say, FM, I'm going to fall over. And FM used to say, all right, Luli, fall over if you must, but don't stiffen your neck. I may add, she never fell over. Right. Michael, would you be the victim?
Speaking of falling over, one moment.
Oh, yes. I'm very glad you did that, Michael, because
No, it's okay.
Bill and I were giving a weekend introductory course, and they were very unstable couches, and I was taking a rather large lady, actually, on the thing, and it suddenly collapsed, and I was left holding this enormously heavy lady. Nobody noticed, but the awful thing was that it crashed down on my foot. Why the bone wasn't broken is another question. Okay, now, the reason I have all this selection is because FM used to say that what was important as to height of book was to get it so that it wasn't so high that the head was being forced that way, and it wasn't so low that the head was dropping back. So each person is different according to the relationship of the neck and the head. Some people are very sort of thrown forward with the throat, so you've got to build them up, you know, and as they work with you, so you can remove one or two of these. Okay, Michael, well, now let's come round. Which way around am I working? Okay. Yes, you come this side, yes.
Wear my shoes on? Or?
I don't mind. Just stand there and we'll just get you going a little bit. That's great. Now just sit down on the couch, giving your orders. That's the way, lovely. Now I'm going to ask you to turn yourself around so that you take your time. Don't forget to say no. This is going to be very slow motion. A little bit further that way, I think. Even more, you're quite tall. I want to give you room to grow. Right. Good. Now I'm going to lie you down. You say no. I'm going to take my glasses off. I hate working. Now, to lie down, you say no. I'm going to free my neck. Think. Don't do it. Just think. That's it. Now, just let yourself go. That's it. That's lovely. Don't tighten your neck. That's the way. I guessed about right of the height. That's fine. I'm going to get caught up in this. Okay. Now, Michael, all you've got to do, lying there, is to listen to what I'm saying, inhibit your first reaction to anything I may say that may disturb you, and just lie there and have a nice time giving your orders and allowing me to do the work. Good. Now I'm going to take this leg down. I'm treating Michael as if he was a new pupil. Michael, I'm going to take your leg down. Now, your first impulse will be to help me with that, especially as you're a nice, strong man, and I'm not a particularly strong lady. So inhibit that idea and just allow me to take the leg for you while you go on thinking of freeing your neck, telling your head to go forward and up, your back to lengthen and widen. Just let the couch support you. Don't make any physical effort. Okay, here we go. It's going to go way over the end, but that doesn't matter. Good, lovely, beautiful. Now, when you're working with someone... Excuse me.
Just clicking on this. Click there.
Thank you. When you're working with someone on the couch, anything you do, like I've just done with the leg, you've got to watch very carefully what the head is doing. All the time, you've got to be watching that head-neck relationship so that you're not disturbing this. If anything you do disturbs this direction here, it's too much. So you have a lovely criterion of whether you're overdoing things. Nothing is important except this. The rest, it's a hierarchy, really. The rest doesn't matter so much. It's important because it's part of the whole, but this is the dominating thing. This is very important, particularly when you're working with shoulders and arms, because it's very easy to pull someone over.
I have a question. Do you have any preference for someone keeping their glasses on or off when they're lying down?
I think I would have them off, probably, but it's okay. I think because it's more comfortable for them. Right, now, Michael, to free the neck, think. That's it, just think. I'm talking as if he was a new pupil, and this is the kind of thing that, you know, they immediately try to do what they think you want them to do. And they don't know, you see. Right, now we're going to free that neck, think, and I'm going to take your head forward and up. Now, when I'm working with a pupil, I try and synchronize the order that I'm giving them verbally with the actual experience I'm giving them with my hands, to link the two things up. Because the body learns better use in exactly the same way that if you're a guitarist or a pianist, your fingers learn by doing it, don't they? By repetition. Right, let's take his head again. Okay, now we're going to free the neck. We're going to order the head forward, Michael. Steady, forward, that's it, and up. Now, it goes forward, as I was saying to some of you yesterday, from there. Everybody pulls back at that joint. We all forget that the spine actually goes right up to where the head joins it. We all behave as if the spine ended there, so we go forward from what my husband calls the hump. Okay, now again, don't do anything. It's silly to say don't do anything. I should be saying notice if you're doing anything, because an Alexander lesson is an exercise in finding out where you're wrong, not an exercise in being right. No point in it, you see. We're here to learn what is wrong so that we need not do it. Okay, it's very slow processes. Neck to be free, head to go forward and up. Lovely. Now link onto that the idea of the back lengthening and widening. Now I'm going to take this leg down, and Michael says no. Neck to be free, head to go forward and up, back to lengthen and widen, to allow me to take this leg. Beautiful. Beautiful. Great. Any place in the world you'll get praised for doing nothing. Now again. Neck to be free. The head to go forward and up. Lovely. To lengthen and widen the back. Now I'm going to go through the whole thing again, putting them up. Don't try and help me, Michael. My leg, not yours. Okay, you get on with your job and I'll do mine. I say that to the children, you know, and one small child said, you must collect an awful lot of arms and legs in the course of a day. Neck to be free, head to go forward and up. Back to lengthen and widen. Now I want you to add an order to that, which is what we call knees to the ceiling, which means it's a sort of shorthand that for thinking of the upper part of the leg lengthening from the hip joint, which is in there, up to the knee, that away, and the lower part of the leg lengthening from the ankle up to the knee. That's it. See, the whole idea is that every part of the body should be tending to lengthen away from its nearest joint. The way we use ourselves is to contract everything as hard as we can into the nearest joint. That's why everybody gets arthritis. Okay. Now you notice that I keep coming back to the head between each thing that I do. Right, now to take your head again, just say no to my hands, to your reaction to my hands, and let me take that head steady. That's it. Forward and up. Now while we're here, I don't know whether I've said this to you lot, but I'm just saying things as I work, as they occur to me. Very often a pupil will, you all know this, push the head very hard back into the book so that they're arching the neck up. And FM used to say, okay, well, if you find you can't get it undone, can't get it free, say to them, push it back into the book as hard as ever you can. so that you'll find out what the wrong is. So he used to say, all right, okay, push it back as hard as ever you can. Now stop. Do that again. Push it back as hard as you can. Now stop. And that, the pupil then gets an awareness of what the wrongness is. But we're so trying to be right all the time that we teeter, you know, on a very fine line, and we never really get to know intimately what the wrong things are that we're liable to do. Okay, once again. Oh yes, indeed. And yourself, working on yourself. If you suspect that something's wrong, jolly well do it. You see, we are wrong anyway, so what's to be lost? Except you're making the wrong conscious then. Okay, free the neck, direct the head forward and up to lengthen and widen the back. That's it. Good, now we're going to take the other leg. Michael says no. Meanwhile, you're going to go on ordering that knee to the ceiling. Free the neck. Steady, that's right. Free the neck, head forward and up, back to lengthen and widen. Now you're going to allow me to move it. Don't do a thing about it, Michael. Attention on your neck. That's it. Beautiful. Beautiful. He used to say, when you put the foot down, don't put it down, just let it find its place. See, I'm supporting it. You can't see because I'm in your way. But the idea is that I'm supporting the leg, and Michael's foot will find its own place. He doesn't have to put it down in an habitual way. So again, he's going to think of lengthening. upper part of the leg up there, lower part of the leg up there. That's good. Now, everything I've done so far is basic, what I learned from FM. As one works over the years, one obviously, I won't say invents, because I hate the word, but one evolves simpler ways, or one even discovers new ways of getting what one wants. So some of it will be things I've come across. Right. Now again, free your neck. Direct your head. This is important to keep free up here when you're using, you know, over the back of a chair, to be able to keep the direction going and that's it. Now I'm going to do something which my students call the scoop. Invented really by my husband. In the old days we had to work on each shoulder separately, but he invented a wonderful thing, which is sliding the hands under the back. Now I'm palm down with my hands. I'm now going to turn them over, disturbing Michael as little as I can. Michael, meanwhile, is going on ordering to his neck and his head. I'm very gently going to give him that experience of that part of the back dropping down and the shoulders widening out. Was that so?
Oh, definitely.
Good. Just want confirmation. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Neck free, head forward and up. The back to lengthen and widen.
Feel that all the way down to my tailbone.
That's right. This is the acid test. When you get that connection right the way through, what I call a rubbery feeling, very alive. No, if you don't get it, you can detect where the blockage is happening.
Because I was noticing releasing in my shoulders when you weren't even touching my shoulders. All this was working and this was melting.
Lovely. Melting like ice cream. That's right. Now again, free the neck. No, Michael.
I knew it. I saw it.
You can't do an undoing.
Right.
You cannot do an undoing. All I'm trying to do is undo any place I come across where unnecessary holding is happening. But no harm done, you see. At all. He learned something then. Neck to be free. It's a strong stimulus, you see. somebody's hands, especially if they're unfamiliar. No, don't do it, Michael. That's better. That's more like it, isn't it?
It's very subtle.
I'm hardly doing anything, actually. I'm directing, I hope, to myself and just... I'm not hauling him about in any way, I hope. Now, Michael, I'm going to move this arm. Say no. Neck to be free. Head to go forward and up. My back to lengthen and widen. And I'm going to move that arm for you. Good, lovely, beautiful. That's it. Now, go on with your orders, and I'm going to just gently take his arm out, and I'm going to put it back in a different place, because this is where we used to have our arms when we were with FM. Not on the... There's no harm in having them up there, but I'm trying to show you what we did with FM. Right, Erica? And the great thing was that we'd all land up. Michael's wrist is actually flat, but most people land up with the wrist right up in the air because of the tension in the shoulder and the elbow. But we were very thrilled always when the day came when the wrist was actually down on the couch, because it was an indication. Right, now I'm going to take this shoulder and you're going to say no. All these things I'm saying are just what I have understood. It isn't the, you know, it isn't the law of the universe or anything. And you will hear different versions from other people, but that doesn't matter. Neck to be free. Head to go forward and up. To lengthen and widen that back. Now that poor old right shoulder I haven't got to yet, have I? Now we're going to take that arm, and Michael says no. That's it. Another thing FM emphasized very much, it's terribly important how you put your hands on a pupil. But it's even more important how you take them off. You've all had this experience, I expect, of somebody's hands on you, and they suddenly get an idea of going from your head to your whatever, and the hands come off like that, and your whole nervous system just gets a frightful shudder. So you've got to inhibit and take your hands away, whatever part of the body you're touching, so that from the pupil's point of view, they don't know they've gone. And then they can go on with the direction that you've given them, or they've given themselves. Right, free the neck. Forward and up. That's it. Now we're getting a real connection down, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
I want to just do this shoulder again. Otherwise it'll be unfair. That's it. That's it. You see, while I'm working on Michael, I'm endeavoring to always be in some form of monkey, modified monkey or lunge. And this is the way to preserve your sanity. Otherwise, you're going to be running into trouble with your backs. See, working on people on a table is very hard work. I mean, it's very easy to, I'm probably doing it, get hooped over, you know.
That time when you took my head, I felt it continue right up through my knees. It's as if...
That's an improvement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
before I was stopping right about here, but this...
Yeah, that went further.
Right.
When we get to your toes, we'll be there, Michael. Okay. So I was working with Penny one day and doing a scoop, I think it was, and leaving my hands there, giving her the widening thing. And she said, gosh, that's undoing my hip joint. You see, we are one. It is the whole body. And this is the magical thing about it. Right. I don't know whether I said it to you people, but it's very difficult to remember, having had 5 different groups, what I've said to any particular group, but do stop me if I'm repeating myself. FM said, when you're successful, do less. And the temptation is, when things are going well, to do just that little bit more. But if you can do less, the real magic happens. Breathe the neck.
As a teacher.
Yes, or on yourself as well.
Oh,
Yeah, think more and do less.
lazy.
Pardon?
Lazy, be lazy.
Absolutely. Well, you see, I'm a Taurian, and they're notorious for being lazy. My favorite occupation is doing nothing. That's it, Michael. Now, I gave him quite a strong impulse that time. I really got a bit out of his back, I think, didn't I?
You did, but it wasn't like a pull. It was different. I mean, it was as if the lengthening occurred, but it wasn't just like someone came up and...
Hauled on you.
No, right.
No. I hope not, Michael.
Well, I pointed out that
Yeah.
to point out the difference of
Yes.
the quality.
Yes.
Would you explain a little bit about how mindful is to take this information on into his daily activities?
Well, he's got to use what he's using when he's lying there. He hasn't got to try and remember what it felt like or anything rubbish like that, because if you try and remember what an experience was, it locks you into that moment in time when you had it. And as FM used to say, it'll be no use to you in a week's time, or even tomorrow. Because what we're doing is, we're hopefully going into the unknown, not repeating boring old experiences we've had a dozen times before. So, you see, all we've got to take into our daily life and to apply to it is our ability to notice that there's a stimulus there, not respond to it straight away, give our orders, and carry on, and not worry whether it's right or wrong. And FM used to say to us, well, okay, give your orders, and hope to God it'll be wrong. So the only way you can learn something is when you're wrong. This is where ordinary education is so absolutely up the pole, because the teacher expects you to be right. Well, you wouldn't be there learning if you were right.
Does it get easier being wrong more often?
Well, yes, this is what makes it so fascinating, you see. If you can have the attitude that it is a voyage of exploration to find out where you're wrong and in what ways you're wrong. And you see you're wrong, you get more wrong as you go on, because, no, really, because to begin with, everything's very crude. And as you go on working on yourself, it's like Peer Gynt's onion, rather, you see, and it gets down layer after layer after layer of tension until in the end it's the difference between a thought or not a thought. And from the outside, anybody looking at you say, oh, marvelous use, you know. But if I'm not actually working on myself, it's nothing. Do you see what I mean? Oh, the difference to me, you know. When I'm ordering, I may look awfully good, but I may be, you know, at a standstill, really. And only I know that. Constant vigilance, constant awareness. But you see, we can't be awake all the time, can we? Any of us.
I like to ask a question about children.
Yes.
Because you talk about, in learning, the importance of not being afraid to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I notice in little children that fear creeps in real quickly, of always wanting to be right.
Yes, I know.
So if, from an Alexander teacher, in dealing with children, how does one do that?
Well, one makes a game of it as far as possible. One never says to a child, you're naughty, or you're lazy, or you're not attending. You say, that was a rather naughty thing to do, or that was a silly thing to do, not you are a silly child. Always speak to them, don't bring the essence of the child into the criticism. It isn't the child that's naughty, it's just doing something you don't have, it doesn't happen to be convenient for you, usually.
Is the reason that you do the work on the table to increase your awareness of your whole body?
Yes, and you can get such wonderful transformations happening when people are not doing anything but ordering, inhibiting and ordering, and working very gently with them. You can get things you can't get standing up. You can get to places you can't get when they're standing up.
In terms of?
Giving them the experience.
Okay, so they know themselves more?
Well, this is the aim of the whole thing, isn't it? But I think it's extremely valuable. And obviously FM did too, or he wouldn't have taken so much trouble to teach us in detail how to do it and what not to do, most important of all.
Would you agree with saying that giving your orders and having a table lesson gives you the opportunity to move into that new territory without the responsibility of having to be vertical?
That's right. You've got nothing to worry about there, you see, that everything's being taken care of. So it's a rather pure form of inhibiting and ordering, isn't it?
And then when you get into vertical, you've had a little bit of a lead.
When you come up, something is there maybe, with luck. But that doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter. There's a whole lifetime.
How long do you stay with it, with the team? I mean, now with Mike, how long do you stay with it?
Oh, it varies very much. Sometimes it's a 10-minute flip, sometimes it's in half an hour. But I mean, with a pupil, my lessons are always half an hour, because I'm a terrible creature of habit. And I gave half an hour lessons when I was with FM. Some people give 40 minutes, some people give 3/4, but...
What did FM feel about the length of a lesson?
Well, he gave half an hour lessons, and you see, we had very little room at Ashley Place, and one had to learn to be very aware of the time, because if you ran over with the lesson, some other poor teacher with their pupil in tow would be waiting outside the door, and the whole timetable would go wrong. So one had to, a sort of bell goes off in me, a kind of red light goes on. It goes on for two reasons. Sometimes because I'm running overtime, and other times at 20 minutes or something like that, when the pupil I know has had enough. And this is very interesting. I mean, this has developed over the years. This red light goes on, and I think, that's it. And even if it's only 20 minutes, I'll stop. Because I know that if you go on too long, you can get people fainting and feeling sick and goodness knows what all. So you've got to be very attentive to your victim.
What can you do if someone does faint on you? I had that happen to me once, and I was absolutely floored, and I mean, they absolutely went out cold for 2 seconds.
Yes,
It scared me to death, frankly.
A glass of water.
Yes, but after that, can you, I mean, I don't, it was a friend, a personal friend of mine as well, so I didn't feel quite as threatened by that. But is there something that can be said about, I mean, I didn't really feel like saying, oh, this happens all the time.
No, because it doesn't actually.
No.
Yes.
But I know that it has happened on occasion to different people.
Yes.
Is there something that you can say to the person as a kind of a reassurance as to what has gone on?
Well, it's usually they're hungry, or some changes happened in the internal chemistry. I mean, if they're very livery kind of people, when you work with them, you can stir that up, and they pass out for that reason. Or it may just be a slight, if you get them up too quickly, a slight vasovagal attack, you know, which certain physical types like me are rather liable to. If I'm working with someone on, you know, in a deep squat on the floor, and then I come up too suddenly. But the great thing is to feel confident that it is okay. It's quite in order. It's nasty for them at the time, but don't go on working with them. And it usually means you've gone on a bit too long, or done too much.
Yes,
Tried to make the changes too much.
Yes, I felt that was the case.
Yeah, I'm sure. And this, you know, I sometimes see people. I used to see them at Albert Court, rushing into the kitchen, glass of water, quick, you know. But I tried to warn them about that because it you know, there's all the time there is.
Yes.
If you see what I mean.
It's sometimes difficult to know when you first begin to teach, because you're so eager to give out the information, to make changes and, you know, do well, that sometimes you lose sight of how much information your pupil can absorb.
This comes with experience.
Yes.
You see, you know what that's called, don't you? Endgame. We all do it. We all do it.
Marjory, I have very little experience with table lessons.
Yes.
And I think I heard you say that when someone asked how we would carry this into activity, that you wouldn't necessarily do that. And you've had years and years of experience doing this, so I'm wondering the benefits, if you could espouse on the benefits of doing table lessons, what you see the people coming to you gaining from having table lessons, because that's a little experience with it.
Well, very often when you get somebody up, I mean, you see them, or anyone who's with you sees them all kind of scrooky, you know, and they get up, and there they are, absolutely wonned. You know, everything's changed by practically everybody but doing practically nothing. Now again, free the neck, broaden up at the head.
And do you find that over time that that's something that they integrate for themselves, just through having table lessons?
But I don't just do table lessons. You see, I do, all my pupils start off in the chair. They've got to work first and then have the nice bit afterwards. But that's not a law. Some people like to work on the table first and then get them up, having improved the condition. Michael, I just want to... Now, this is something that I have found useful. I've got my hand under... Yes, do come a bit closer, so long as you don't crowd me or get in the way of the cameras. I've got my left hand under his shoulder blade, and I'm going to slide my hand very gently down his spine. Okay, Michael. That's it. Now, I'm down just below what Bill calls the hump. And this is a place where everybody fixes.
Could you describe once more what you just did?
Just say it as you do. I've got my left hand under his shoulder, and I've got my right hand just on his spine below the hump. Now I'm going to, at one and the same time, sort of, well, it's difficult to put into words, but I'm kind of trying to undo the tension round beside the spine on both sides with my fingers. At the same time, I'm giving him the experience of that shoulder widening out. And it's a great relief, isn't it, Michael? And I was hardly doing anything at all.
I mean, even when you were answering the question, it was happening.
Yes, I know. His legs go, ooh.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
nice.
sorry.
No.
I don't know why that happened.
What happened was that I didn't notice that I was pushing with my feet.
Yeah.
And when you did that, I said, wow, I was holding in my legs and pushing with my feet.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, whatever holding was happening in my lower back here just let go.
Yeah.
It's the only way of describing it.
You're a wonderful person to demonstrate on, Michael. But that's quite powerful, isn't it? You know, that's quite a powerful thing. And I was hardly touching you.
What were you doing?
Well,
It down or
I was getting, it's very difficult to demonstrate, I was getting my thumbs on the bones here, these bones, you know, and at the same time my fingers were finding out where his hip joint is. It's very difficult to do on very fat people, this, but it's lovely on, you can feel it. And with my fingers I was giving that direction of the knee up there, at the same time as my thumbs were very gently indicating that this pelvic, you know, thing. I invented that one. I do take credit for that one because it is so simple. It takes so little out of you. You see, all the time I'm trying to take as little out of myself as I can get away with. I have to, otherwise I can't work. But it's the subtlety of these things that is so exciting.
So
and
that was a rotation in this direction of the pelvis?
see, everybody tilts the pelvis that way. And that makes the big hollow in the lower back and stops the legs working properly. Well, you know, it does everything.
The other thing that this morning when I was coming here, I was running and not watching, and I twisted my ankle. And because of that, I was protecting myself a little bit,
yes,
which really wasn't helping me deal intelligently with my in-gaining.
Yes, that's right. Which ankle was it, Michael? It was this one, yes.
Well, the interesting thing is that he learned all of this doing table.
That's right. That's right. It's a wonderful learning situation if what you're interested in.
And he could have done the same thing otherwise.
Oh, absolutely.
He did it here as well.
He could have done it anywhere. You see, the vehicle, what I call the vehicle of your work, that is the kind of activity you're putting the pupil through, it doesn't matter a button. You know, the nearer it's connected with everyday life, the better. But if you're working with a musician, you see, you've got to go into rather unknown territory. I don't mean you've got to learn the instrument, but you know, you've got to understand. But it's very simple, very simple.
Could you elaborate on what FM would do with the class when he was teaching you how to table work, or what to do for yourself while you were doing table?
Oh, well, we'd all be there, all 12 of us, and one of us would be, or sometimes, usually two, wasn't it, Erica? Good. Usually one on the head and one working on the back or whatever. And FM would watch and would criticize and stop us when we were wrong and show us, demonstrate.
So would he come over and put his hands on the person who was having the hands on, say?
That's right.
Yes.
Very often that. Or he'd send us round the corner and do it himself. You know, it depended. But very often his hands would be over ours. Right. Particularly when we had people sitting or standing, and he'd cover our hands with his and show us. You know, not with words,
right,
but actually show us. That's it. Now, the beauty of being in a real monkey when you're doing this, as he explained to us, is you're giving the direction forward. Michael, leave it alone. That's it. Very subtle. Just a little tiny thing, but see, he's learning, I hope. Again. Fit, forward, and up. That's it. If you want to give a stronger pull, all you do is keep that going and lean back slightly. Then you don't disturb the direction. Have you had enough? Are you sick of that?
I'm fine. Maybe someone else would like it.
Well, I want to see what's happening under here. Now I'm going to do something. We used to always work on the floor because there was only one couch, so we had, you know, everybody used to work on the floor. And when you're working with someone on the floor, it's very easy to go into a deep squat, get hold of the hips, just pick them up like that and alter the pelvic twist and put it down again. And my cousin Maxwell, who was a bit of a, very often, we used to tease him a lot. He was a very naughty boy, really. And he'd been doing something or other. And Patrick got across him, you know, with his legs either side, picked him up and dropped him. And forever after that, I mean, not to hurt him, ever after that was called a Maxwell trap. But you can't do a Maxwell trap when you've got them on the couch. So you have to do something else. Naughty of me to tell them that, isn't it? Now I'm getting under his buttocks to where the bones are, and I'm just with my fingers undoing that pelvic twist and giving him that different. What happened, Michael?
Well, I right down by my tailbone lengthened.
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
What about the thing, when you put hands on, I always notice you do seem to contact with joints and with major bone. You know?
Yes, yes.
Is that part of the thing of...
Well, I gave lessons to one of Theravamsa. You know Theravamsa, any of you? He teaches Vipassana meditation. One of his teachers. And he had studied acupuncture and Tai Chi and all these. He was from Malaysia anyway, from Siam, that used to be, you know what I mean, Thailand. And the first lesson I gave him, he said, "This is incredible. You're touching all the acupuncture points." I'm touching all the Alexander points, I reckon. That's it. That's it. And I'm going to lift it right up, Michael. There we go. That's right. Nice. Now we're going to do one of these scoops again. The reason we have foam rubber on our couches at home is so that we can get under there with a minimum of disturbance. That's it. That's what I want. That's it. And also, it's very hard on the hands. It's impossible to do the scoop if you've just got something on a wooden table, because the whole edifice sort of slides along.
You mentioned your hands. The thing I feel like when you touch me is a sense of your whole hand, and I do not feel like you're getting, I don't feel you're fingery. I feel like a sense of that.
Yes, well, I try and get in the whole of my hand in contact with your head, and it's beautifully made so that it fits round in such a lovely way.
Marjorie, I noticed that when you were helping Michael here, when you were touching Michael here, the direction seemed to kind of be almost a kind of down and out here. Was it because he was lifting, or is that a particular direction that you find useful in connecting?
Well, you see, it's all a question of observing what is there. I put my hand on Michael like that, and I can feel a certain tension maybe. Actually, it isn't. It's very good. The bane of all Alexander teachers. Those. So it means that some kind of holding is going on, and what I'm trying to do is to release what is holding that all that whole complicated edifice there out of place. So I'm getting my left hand under there so that I can work on the whole area back and front at the same time. So if you watch steady, don't do it for me, Michael, please. That's it. Okay. Now I'm taking his shoulder blade down and towards the outside, and I'm releasing the muscles which are holding it up in the air. Now it's beginning to be lovely and free.
Marjorie, from the way you spoke, it sounded as though you worked on the floor a lot, doing table work on the floor.
Oh, when you see, we, as students, we had to use the floor.
And you spoke about working the squat. Is that mostly how you work?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. How else can you get to the head, you see?
And did you do that all the way around the body?
Yes. But when you get to the side, you see, you do like that. You see? Arms and work with the. And then.
What about going under the torso?
What the scoop thing?
That kind of work underneath.
Well, you can't do it on. I mean, some teachers try to. Some of my teachers try to do it, but I tell them, you know, you can if you want to, but I wouldn't like to. I think you've got to distort yourself too much. Your top priority is not to ruin yourself. Really. Because in the long run, that's all you've got. But you see, it was wonderful because it really gave terrific tone in the legs for all of us. You can imagine.
Marjory, when you're working on a relatively new student on the table and you put your hands on their head and you feel that they stiffen in their neck and you feel that resistance and that particular weight that comes when the student thinks they're helping you to be lighter, but in fact it makes it harder, do you then ask them to stop and give their orders again? How do you plan, or do you just wait and give more direction with your hands, or what?
Well, obviously what is interfering at that point is what they're doing, isn't it?
Right.
And it's somehow to get them to stop, whatever it is. And very often you can get it by asking them to press the head back into the book and then stop, or something like that. But I like to keep my hands there, and very often the tense muscles will get the message without me doing anything. I may go on just talking to them, you know, not fussing them about anything that's wrong. But I think perhaps we'll get Michael up. If it was a real lesson, I'd do a lot more with getting his back down. Oh, it's all right, it is down, actually. I think fairly good. Right, Michael, we're going to take the leg down and say no. Neck to be free, head to go forward and up, back to lengthen and widen. And we're both ordering that, you see. That's what's so lovely. And FM used to say, so long as I stand beside you and do the brain work, i.e. give the orders aloud, you cannot go wrong. That is what you have got to learn to do for yourself. Do that brain work.
And that's what makes it psychophysical?
Absolutely. I love you, Michael. That's it. So you see, I've got that leg down, but I'm just making sure that we're all right up top. Again. And you see, I try to use my hands in such a way that I'm giving him an inhibiting stimulus. I don't mean inhibiting in the bad sense, but a stopping and a waiting. So I'm not going to rush for anybody. That's it. Now we give a nice direction up with the left hand from the hip to the knee. Right, Erika? And at the same time, we hold the foot there, and the direction with my left hand, I hope, is giving him an upward one from the ankle. And then we lift that, and keeping it lengthening, we put it down. And then when we get it there, we just move it to make sure the hip isn't tightening. Sorry. Good. Now, I'm going to get him up. I have a great problem with this because most of my large gentlemen, look, the first time I do this, I think, either she's going to drop me or... But in fact, you don't take the weight. What I want you to do, Michael, is to just let me do it for you. You're going to inhibit the idea of getting up. You're going to go on giving your orders. When I give you the word, I want you just to begin to bring your knees up a little bit. you understand what I mean? So that they're bent. This takes the strain off the back. FM didn't actually teach us that, but I have discovered, particularly with people with bad backs, if you can synchronize the movement of the head exactly with when you say to them, bring your knees up. A, it slightly distracts them from the worry about how it's going to happen, and also it does really help. Well, you'll see what happens. Right, Michael, we're going to get up. We say no. Free the neck. Direct the head forward and up. Lovely. Okay, we won't get up, just to show we really meant not to. And again, free the neck. FM was a great one at that, wasn't he? He'd give you the stimulus, get you all ready, and say, and we're not going to do it. And start all over again. That's right. Oh, absolutely. Because you got caught out, you see, and he'd say, did you feel slightly disappointed? The answer was yes. Free the neck. The head forward. No. Forward. That's it. Now, you've nothing to do or worry about. Just go on giving the orders. Bend your knees. Now. No. Oh, sorry. It's all right, Michael. Sorry. You didn't. No. It's okay. You see, it's okay. It was fine. It was very good, but it wasn't the way I do it. It wasn't the way FM taught us. This idea of swinging people around. Well, my husband does that, and he's a great big strong man. I can't do that. FM's way was to get us straight up so that we were sitting with our knees bent.
Can I just try it once
Yes,
more?
sure. I should have warned you.
But it went very easily. It
was marvellous, actually, what you did. But you kind of got out of my hands. Ran away, yes. There was nothing wrong with it at all. It was just that what I'm trying to do, you see, is show you what FM taught me. And that was not that. You remember what I said about shoulders?
Yeah. This gallery here. That's...
Yes, I know. I think you're very brave, Michael. Now we're going to lie down again. No. That's it. Now just let yourself go. Go on, Audrey. Doing. That's lovely. Okay, we'll put them down. That's right.
So I bend the knees.
When I give you the word, you just bring your knees up.
Okay.
And stay there. I simply can't manage this swizzling, and I see no need for it in my case because FM taught me to do it this way, and I'm quite happy with that. Now, free the neck, the head forward and up, the back to lengthen and widen. Now, you're interested in directing out that way without doing anything. Okay, forward and up. That's it. Now, bend your knees now.
That was interesting.
No.
I've never gotten up like that, and it's really lovely.
But isn't that the traditional way, Erica? It's the way we... Now. Pardon?
It was.
It's almost like a dance.
Well, that's it. Now we're going to turn round. So you can turn yourself round. That's it. Take your time. That's it. And now we're going to get off the couch and we'll say no. Let's go on up there. I'm going to let you do it yourself. Okay? Because it's a very slippery cover and it's better for you to do it. How are we doing for time? Well,
We're about up, actually. We're about up for time.
Thank you.
okay.
Marjory Barlow, I want to tell you first how happy we all are that you are here and how honored we are to have you at the International Teachers Congress. At what point in your life did you actually start to train teachers?
To actually train them?
Mm-hmm.
1950. Up to that time, Alexander had been the only person training teachers. And I had two pupils who I knew were destined to become Alexander teachers. They were both professors at the Royal College of Music, which was just behind where I work. And they couldn't possibly have got up to Victoria, but they could always spare 3 hours just to pop up the steps and come to me. And at that time, I heard that Alexander wasn't actually going into the class all that much, and that Walter Carrington was really doing a great deal of the work. And as I had been FM's assistant when Walter was in the training course, it didn't make much sense, really. So we talked it over and decided we would start our own. That's how it started.
And how many teachers, not exactly number, but would you say you and Dr. Barlow have trained?
Well, I don't know the exact number. I've never counted, but it was between 1950 and 1980, or 81, really. Mm-hmm. And I never had more than 7 in the class. And it was pretty continuous throughout those 30 years.
And what have you found to be the most difficult thing for a person training to be a teacher to learn about the work?
The whole idea of a training course to me is teaching people to really know how to work on themselves, to get those experiences which can't come from wonderful teachers' hands, of actually making your own new experiences with what happens when you work on yourself. Otherwise, they haven't got anything to teach their pupils about how to work on themselves. So a lot of the time is spent working on yourself, just as it was with FM's class.
You said yesterday that FM did not have great hands, that he had a great brain, and that he had... Did I miss that? Did I get it wrong?
Yes, he had wonderful...
I thought you said that was not his greatest thing, that his brain and his powers of observation were.
No. His hands were absolutely fantastic. He could hardly touch you and totally transform everything. Oh, no. Isn't it terrifying, that people can not hear what you're saying, or hear the opposite of what you're saying? Really, one should never open one's mouth. It's funny,
Politicians learn that.
I've always refused to have anything to do with the media. I won't give interviews. I won't do anything like this. This is a special occasion.
Well, we won't get it wrong this time.
For the first time this year, I did it for the Daily Mail because everybody pressured me, rather, all the people I trusted. And you should see what came out. None of my pearls of wisdom, just a lot of awful gossip and getting it wrong, too.
Well, how important do you think hands are to a teacher?
I think they're very, very important. And I think if the person has really worked very hard on themselves, that delicate craftsmanship, I think is the word, is terribly important, because you can put people awfully wrong by giving them a wrong stimulus. But I don't think it's the main thing in teaching. I think the main thing in teaching is really insisting that the person works themselves. You see, this isn't something really that you get from the outside. I always go back to FM. What happened with him? There he was with a problem. What did he do? What was the method he used to get from A, where his problem was, to the solution? And he used to say, if anybody can do what I do, if they will do what I did. But none of you want anything mental. Nobody wants to use this. So there are many things that are important about the hands. Very important how you put your hands on. But, you've got to be watching yourself all the time. This is the important thing. But another thing that's frightfully important is how you take them off. It's almost as important how you take your hands off. You're giving somebody the directions, and then you get an idea you're going to go somewhere else in the body, and off go. And the whole nervous system judders like that.
How would you talk about what Alexander called direction?
I would say that every time an idea comes to you to do anything at all, messages are sent from your brain through your nervous system to the rest of you. Remember, I'm not a scientist, I'm only an Alexander teacher, but this is, the way I see it, very, very simply, really. The movement is then carried out. Well, now, before we have lessons, all this is totally automatic. Habits are built up, and they're built up in the nervous system. Never mind about the old muscles and bones, it's the direct connection. You see, there's no division between your brain and the rest of your nervous system. And it's that immediacy that is so wonderful. When you send a message, a conscious message, it's there before, you know. And so that anything that gets in the way or is interposed between the message given, you know, there's a lot of people like to have images and all that sort of thing. Right. That is all unnecessary.
So when you say that we interfere with ourselves, you're speaking of that neural response that takes place between the brain and the rest of the body, and how we interfere with the, should I say, the purity of it, or the cleanliness of it, or the directness of it? Maybe?
Yes, you see, when the stimulus comes, I mean, this really brings us back to inhibition, doesn't it? This is the keystone of the whole Alexander technique. You see, he couldn't get anywhere. He went up every avenue that he could think of, and it wasn't until he realized that every time that stimulus came to speak, back went his head. Mm-hmm. And he tried everything, you see, from putting it forward to, you know, everything he could think of. But one day he saw that it was his response, his automatic, habitual response to the stimulus that was the trouble. It was so quick. So he realized that his first bit of work was to, when the stimulus came, say no to it. Not say no to the stimulus, and this is very important, but to say no to the first reaction to that idea. What happened at first, it was a habitual thing, you see. But if you say no, there's the stimulus, there's the response. If you don't say no, it's like that. It's habitual. It's perpetual motion, you know, just like an automaton. Mm-hmm. We're a lot of robots, really. But when this stimulus comes, you don't allow that response to happen, there's a little bit of space between the two. A place of freedom there. The only freedom we'll ever have in this world, I think. You know, people talk about freedom in a big way, but if that happens, if you can refuse to respond to the stimulus, mm-hmm. you have three choices. Either you can decide to allow your habitual response to happen because it's the most appropriate for the situation you're in, or you can decide to make a conscious new response, or, best of all, you can decide to do nothing, you know, if that's appropriate. Mm-hmm. But it gives you the chance to respond appropriately to this moment.
Would you say that FM was an extraordinarily patient man to have experimented with himself in this way to come up with this?
I simply can't believe it, you know. It is the most fantastic story. I think that he was a very passionate, very tempestuous man. I mean, in his initial state, very not bad-tempered, but very quick-tempered. And my mother used to say that, you know, if he saw someone ill-treating an animal or something like that, anything like that, he literally saw red, and they were afraid he was going to murder somebody one day. You know, I mean, it was really so quick. And I mean, this is his initial endowment, really. But before I started going to Ashley Place to have lessons, my mother warned me. She said, "You'll be in tears every day." Only once, but it wasn't FM who did it. And this was the fantastic change, you see. And of course, it was very important for him to apply the work to these terrifically quick, deep emotional responses. Mm-hmm. And in a way, that was why the work appealed to me when I first read Constructive Conscious Control, mm-hmm. that it was possible, to become more aware, to reach perhaps a level of awareness that was a little bit better than the one I'd got, and also to not to be so subject to these emotional swings, mm-hmm. really. You know, I was like a pendulum.
And that's in the family, it seems.
Well, I suppose it must be. Yes, I suppose it must be.
Well, you are one of the few teachers that I have ever read things that you have written which talk about the emotions and the spirit relative to the ideas of conscious control.
Yes.
And I wonder if that comes out of your personality, or the fact that Alexander himself was also interested in that, and we don't hear that much about that aspect of his work?
Well, I'm glad you've asked me that, because it's very difficult to define what a religious person is. One thing he was not was dogmatic. If he was asked about religion, see, people love to pin FM down to get his opinion on this, that, or the other. And they would ask him direct questions like, what do you believe, FM? And he used to say, I believe everything and I believe nothing. He would not, what's the word I want, pontificate on subjects that were not his special province. He had his own way, his own beliefs, his own relationship with the universe. It sounds a bit silly, really, but he had a sense, I'm sure, of being of the universe being a rather intelligent place. You know, that he had a great sense of purpose, and in his whole life, really, and he had a very, very strict religious upbringing. Church on Sundays 3 times a day. Sunday school in the afternoon, yes, all the children, there were 8 of them, you know. I mean, there was a big age gap between the first and the last. But my mother told me this, of course. And he was a very religious boy and young man. But he had a younger brother who had meningitis, got meningitis, and screamed. And of course, they were out in, you know, very far from doctors. Nobody could do anything. And FM prayed and prayed, and the baby died. And this made him think again. This really brought him up short, you know. So that, well, to me, he was the most religious person in the real sense of anybody I've ever met. And he was so inspiring. He really could lift you, you know, if you were in a bad state. He could, just by talking to him somehow and talking about the work, you know, suddenly you were up there and, you know, rather like Bach's music, and you saw it all made sense.
And in your own further work on yourself and your own studies, you have made some connections between this work and some of the, what I would call very practical Eastern spiritual philosophies. And I find that unusual, and I'm glad to have access to that, because there are many teachers who do not consider this only something that applies to the body and mind, but that the spirit and emotions can be affected as well.
Well, of course. It's the whole person, isn't it? And I think, rather like FM, I had a very strong religious sense from the beginning. Well, you know, from when one gets it, and went down quite a number of paths. Since I started the work, you see, the wonderful thing is you've got a criterion. Since I started doing the work, I would explore these various avenues, and when I came up against a contradiction with the technique, it was the other thing that went. You see, so that I've got that lovely guide in everything, really. If it conflicts with what I know about the technique, I'm not interested any longer. But there are certain things, I think, which don't conflict at all. And I don't allow these things that I pursue for my own personal development to come into my teaching, except indirectly, of course. One can't help saying what one believes. But I certainly wouldn't approve of any kind of admixture of I do think the battle is to keep the Alexander teaching pure. By that I don't mean that people can't develop their own ideas, but our job is to teach the technique. But when it becomes a bit of Tai Chi and a bit of yoga and a bit of this and a bit of that, you see, there isn't time in a training course for that. There really isn't time.
Do you feel that there's a lot of that going on in the
Well, there is,
Alexander work
isn't there?
now?
I know that it's inevitable with any teaching, if you look back through history, that with time it becomes diluted, it becomes changed, it becomes adulterated, if you like. And we all have to bring to it what we are. This is really what we're talking about, isn't it? What a person is. And certain things have influenced me very greatly. For instance, Krishnamurti. I love his teaching, and my husband and I used to go and listen to him whenever we could. And for a time I was very interested in the Gurdjieff work, but not Gurdjieff, the Maurice Nicoll, you know, the Jungian. Mm-hmm. And I used to go and be taught about that for about 7 years, whenever I could, and really sort of picking out what was, what was on the same line. You see, truth is one, isn't it? However you get to it. And the extraordinary thing about FM was that he had no school. He wasn't, it was entirely himself. It was absolutely original, what he did.
I'm glad to hear you say that all these other things must be kept within the framework of the work as we know it, so that it is able to grow as what it is. When you were training, or let me put it this way, at this time, it's obvious that both men and women have made great contributions to the Alexander work.
Yes.
And it's marvelous that we don't, in this field, have to worry about equal pay and those kinds of concepts. When you were working in your early training or in your early work, did you encounter any difficulties being a woman doing this work?
Not at all. Mm-hmm. It's never occurred to me when I'm working that there's any such thing as a sex difference. No difference at all.
Well, I recall that you mentioned that A.R. said, "Oh, she's going to run off and get married."
Well, yes, he did say to me quite often, we've sweated blood to train you, and all that's going to happen is you're going to go off and get married and give it all up. Mm-hmm. And of course, I did get married, and I didn't.
And you didn't give it all
up? My mother was
was
funny too. She said to me when I got married, of course, when you get married, you won't want to go on working. I went on working. Then when I got pregnant with my daughter, well, now, when you have a baby, of course you won't be able to go on working. And then when I did, and then my son arrived. And now you've got 2 children, you can't possibly. But you see, it's so easy. You just fit the pupils in to your baby's routine. And of course you have to cut down. But it's a wonderful life for a woman. If you've got a nice husband who'll give you the freedom to do it, who's also in the work, which is a help, but...
Yes, I would say that you and Dr. Barlow probably are unusual in that sense. How has that been for you, both being in the work together?
Well, we've had to work it out. You see, we're very, very different sorts of people, as is obvious. He's got his own contribution. I mean, he's made a wonderful contribution to the work, and it wouldn't be where it is today if he hadn't written books and so on. One thing I will not allow anybody to do is interfere with my work. And that's been made quite plain. In that field, I do what I think about my teaching.
How do you keep a sense of excitement and freshness? How do you keep from getting fixed about the work?
Because I think I'm terribly lucky, but I find it more exciting the longer I do it. You see, you're always having new experiences with I learn from my pupils all the time. I learn, really, I ought to be paying them, No, truly, I feel this. The whole thing is such an exciting adventure. And if you're working on yourself, you're making new experiences, so that it's never the same, even with the same pupil. And that's very interesting, because FM used to say, the ideal is if you can approach your pupil every time you give them a lesson as if you'd never seen them before, so that you see them as they are today. You don't bring to this encounter all, of how they've been in the past. Give them a chance, he used to say, to be what they are today. And this is a very important idea, because if one could treat one's nearest and dearest in this way, not bring to when you see them in the morning, everything that's happened in the past 46 years, it gives everybody freedom. It would be lovely.
Do you feel that the technique I shan't say that it's an end in itself, but that as an applied work, well, let me say this. Walter suggested that it's wonderful for people to have another activity to do.
Oh, yes.
So that they can use the technique actively in something else.
Absolutely, it is wonderful. And I think it's very important for teachers to keep on learning new things. For instance, I was 42 when I started to learn the classical guitar. And I mean, I don't play it very well, I admit, but I've had an enormous amount of pleasure out of it. And it was so lovely, lovely to be put back in the position of a pupil. You see, you've got to remember all the time what it's like to be a pupil, how difficult it is, and people forget this. So I love to begin to learn something new and use the technique to apply to it. It's very difficult with a, excuse me, a musical instrument.
Yes.
Extremely difficult.
Was it difficult for FM to be patient after he had spent all this time working on himself and developing his ideas and his own use? Was it difficult for him to be patient with beginners?
Well, it had been. Obviously, what my mother told me about, you know, how cross he was going to get with me. But by the time I landed up there, which was 1932, he was never impatient with me or with anybody I saw him teaching. He realized, you see, I mean, he really knew and remembered how difficult it is. And he used to say to me sometimes, you know, the people who come here are the salt of the earth. But if they knew what they were going to have to undergo, they wouldn't come. You know, when they first... But then he used to say, well, where else can they go?
Indeed. Do you look forward to further developments in this work, either for yourself or through students that you have trained? Where do you see the Alexander technique headed?
I look forward to it developing in many, many different ways. FM used to say, we're only on the fringe of this thing, only on the fringe. We've got so much more to learn, and it will develop in all sorts of directions and be applied to all sorts of different things. But the danger is that the real basis of it will get lost. And he continually used to say to us, stick to principle. If you stick to principle, if you use the basic thing that I used to get from where I was to where I wanted to be, you can't go wrong. And people have so many different talents and gifts and directions in which they want to go. And given that basic fidelity, I think is the word, to that thing, you can't go wrong. It's when they throw away the baby with the bathwater. And this is what worries me about the technique and certain developments, that I did read somewhere that it was old-fashioned to give orders. Don't you love it? You know, they'd improved on that. But, oh dear. I always go back to FM. What did he do? I say to my students, if you're in doubt, go back to what he did. That's what we've got to do.
How do you think that we can prevent this either watering down or unfaithfulness to the principle?
We can't. We can only look after ourselves. We've only got one field to plow, and that's this one.
I believe, however, that this International Congress and the presence of yourself and Dr. Barlow and the other master teachers will do a great deal to influence younger teachers who have had no exposure to all your work, and perhaps give them a desire to really get to the principle.
Approfondir les choses, for which there is no translation into English except get to the bottom of it, which is very ugly. Yes. Yes, well, time will tell, won't it?
What do you feel has been your major contribution to the technique through your training of teachers or your writings or your work generally?
Never thought about it, really. I don't know.
Well, you certainly have made a contribution and are making one still.
Well, I've had such fun doing it, you know. It's not a question that's ever come into my head, really. You know, Bill's the writer. Bill's the one who lectures and is interviewed, because I've always tried to avoid it. All I've ever wanted is to be left alone, in peace, not to be interfered with, to work quietly with somebody who's prepared to come and spend half an hour with me in my room. And that's all I've ever asked of life since I started the technique. You see, so it isn't quite like that, is it?
No.
What has been my contribution? I haven't the least idea, or even if there's been one.
Oh, there's no doubt.
But, well, no. The great thing is, you see, that it's enabled me to live my life, I hope, improving in the sense that what I'm interested in is, and what I've always been interested in, is knowing what I'm doing. Thinking. Think about that for a minute. Thinking what you are doing. You know, these phrases come and go. They're in the sort of language, and we never think what they mean. Thinking what you are doing. I like to say thinking how you are doing. That's the other one. But you see, thinking in activity was such an important idea to FM. And you see, he used to call it a means of learning to control human reaction. And his idea was that you could bring the body and the mind and the whole organism, the whole person, into a unity. You see?
And this thinking and activity, is this different from what we normally associate with the word thinking?
Oh, yes. Well, it's a very special quality, isn't it? It's not... You see, words are so difficult, aren't they? Because, as FM used to say, any word I use has got barnacles on it. You know, everybody brings their their past experience of that word. And he used to say to me, I really needed to invent a new language. But if I had, nobody would have understood a word of it. So there you are. No, it's very hard to put it into words what ordering or giving messages is. But it's a very attentive process. You've got to pay attention. And this is something we all find extremely difficult. You know, our attention span is about 1.5 seconds. And talking about ordering, FM used to say, any fool can think of one thing at a time and go on thinking of it. But when you have to go on thinking of one thing and add two, and go on thinking of one and add two and add three, that's about as much as most of us are capable of in a lifetime's learning. But you see, he did give us examples of a long sequence of orders in the monkey, going into monkey and going over the back of a chair with the hands on the chair, because you've got to give, well, you know, the whole sequence. I mean, it's.
But just what you were just saying, I think, is why creative people, performing artists, are so tuned into Alexander's work, because you have to be thinking of so many things at once, and this is such a wonderful practice in that.
That's right.
And a discipline in sharpening your awareness at those levels. That's right.
And paying attention to more than one thing at a time. He used to say, if we hadn't got that capacity, none of us would be here. You know, we wouldn't have survived. And he was very keen on being attentive to what was going on around you. And, you know, when you're talking to someone, you've got to be attentive to them. You've got to be with them.
But in the sense, did he talk about concentration?
Oh, did he not? It was a forbidden word. Verboten. Absolutely. He used to explain to us that concentration means bringing everything to a point. What we need is a kind of awareness which is as wide as possible, taking into account as many factors as we're capable of taking into account.
Which is marvelous.
But you see, the thing about why musicians and people like that are so in the same world is because they have to spend hour after hour after hour. When I go to a concert, I look at those instrumentalists and I think, my goodness, how many hours of solitary, disciplined work has gone into the fact that they are sitting here tonight playing that violin or whatever. And that is what the work is. And unless you do that, and especially if you're a teacher and training people, unless you are doing that work every day, like playing your scales, he used to say, every day go back to those words.
I want to thank you for your words and tell you how grateful again and honored we all are to have you here.
Thank you very much indeed.